Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Uncommon Sense. I'm Junia. Thank you for joining us. My guest today is Dr. Tim Nash. Dr. Nash is Vice President of Strategic and Corporate Alliances and the Fry Endowed Chair in Free Market Economics at Northwood University. Dr. Nash received his BBA from Northwood University, an MA in Economics from Central Michigan University, and his doctorate from Wayne State University, all in Michigan. Welcome, Dr. Nash.
Pleasure to be with you, Junia.
So everybody talks about the economy, but what is the economy? Do different people mean different things?
I think in general, most people would agree that the economy is the production of goods, services, and assets on one hand, and then on the other hand, it's the measurement of a person's economic production, so their dollar income and their psychic income. The satisfaction and usefulness that they get out of what they do and what society gets out of what they do.
I've never heard the psychic income discussed as something you could quantify. Is there tables or are those questions asked? Or?
Well, you know, it's interesting. There's a lot of people in economics today trying to measure happiness, trying to measure what satisfies people, what makes an individual, a group of people, a country happy. And, you know, there's a lot of debate as to how well they measure it, to your point, but it's actually had a few individuals that have been considered for the Nobel Prize in economics, and so it really does get into that whole notion of psychic income and happiness and individual productivity.
I always feel for myself, and maybe it's true of others, that if I feel I'm making a contribution, that it's in line with my values, that I am contributing, as it were. Even when I was working, you know, for dollars, I always felt better, you know, I felt in the flow. And when I was doing other things, you know, didn't have the same psychic what you're saying, I believe, is psychic satisfaction. So I'm glad they're measuring it. You know, there seems to be a difference, though, amongst economists, got it right, on their, view of the economy and their recipe or their suggestions about this, that, and the other that might come through various government policies. Can you explain that?
Well, I think that as you look at the U.S. economy, I'd make 2 points, and then we can talk global economy as well. There certainly is a philosophical difference that's taken place in the last 100 years in the United States as to the role of government and the role of private enterprise and the role of households and government. If we go back, Junia, to 1900, government consumed less than 8% of GDP. And the state government state and local government was twice the size of the federal government. Today, no matter whose measurement you look at, government consumes somewhere between 40 and 44% of the economy, and the federal government consumes somewhere between 25 and 26% of GDP.
Of the 44%.
Correct. So in other words, if you look at 1900, it was the federalist system that the founding fathers put in place, clearly still in 1900. Today, we are the inversion of that, and we're becoming more of a welfare state. We're becoming more of a state that says government should be doing more in the economy than the private sector. We're an economy that says the role of government should be greater than many of us believe that it should be. Now, personally speaking, I think that as we look at the economy today, there's a view in Washington with the current administration, President Obama. I'm sure he's a good and decent human being, but his view that the government should drive the economy, in my opinion, is incorrect, and it is something that the last 30 years, especially in Europe and in Asia, has proven to be incorrect.
And in Detroit.
Oh, absolutely in Detroit. You know, Detroit's my hometown, and I look at what's happened to Detroit. You know, the sad thing is that if you look at the city of Detroit, it's the second largest landmass city in the country. And we have more abandoned property in Detroit right now, commercial and residential, than we have entire square mileage in Paris, France.
But what I was thinking of is if you view I'm not of the government as good at school, but I will get to that. But if you are of that school, Detroit played out that in extreme. Tons of government programs, strong help from every kind of way, high dependency. So when I look around at this kind of a philosophy you're saying, I'm saying, well, do I want a country like Detroit, which really it doesn't really work. But separate from whether you're for more of the government or for not, I have a concern that it has to do with your spirit. I'm from a pioneer Oklahoma family, and I just feel we can do it. Something comes up that's not good, we can handle this. Who do we need to do? Who do we need to talk to? How do we need to think about it? I never think of government. I know there's a lot of people who do. One of the people who got kicked off her insurance, and they're trying to force her into this Obamacare, and she's on a marginal income. They were going to force her to do it and give her a subsidy. And she said, I do not want to do that. I have pride. I have dignity. I want to support myself. So anyway, that's a far side from what does an economist do, so to speak. But if, in fact, government is as big as you say it is, and it is, then economists have bigger and bigger roles, right?
Well,
because they have to be consulted by all these people.
Absolutely, and there certainly is a group within the economics profession that would argue the size and scope of government is just where it should be. There's another group that would argue that government should be larger, which means more jobs in working for the government as economists, more individuals in academia working to develop the models for a larger size and scope of government. And quite frankly, I come from, and my colleagues at Northwood in the economics department come from the school of thought driven by Milton Friedman and Friedrich von Hayek and Adam Smith, that the fact of the matter is the greatest productivity takes place when individuals, as you noted, those people with their pioneer spirit, with the mentality to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, those are the individuals that have made this country great. And what a lot of people, I don't think really realize, Junia, is that if you look at even the original Plymouth colony, the fact of the matter is the original Plymouth colony was founded under socialism, in which everybody was equal. The government owned the colony, the government of the colony owned all the land, everybody farmed, and everybody received equally. Within the first 3 years, they didn't have the money to pay back the bank in England that loaned the money for the original colony. They weren't bringing new individuals over. Governor Bradford, in the third year, completely privatized the land. And if you look at it, there's a great story, I'll send it to you, by Charles Wolfe, where he documents all of this, that production the next 3 years in the Plymouth colony tripled agricultural production. They cleared 4 times the amount of land that they had in the first 3 years because they gave incentives, they had private property, private ownership, and that can-do Oklahoma spirit really was innate in our original colonists, our original pilgrims.
So how would we preserve or create this spirit?
Well,
younger people.
I really believe today that what's happened is we are not communicating enough to young people about the notion of being an entrepreneur. You look at this great town, you look at what H.H. Dow did over 100 years ago, and you look at the entrepreneurs since then. You look at the kinds of things you've been involved in, that Ted was involved in terms of venture capital and venture capitalism. The fact of the matter is we just need to go out there and tell these young people that you can do this, that there is an incredible opportunity out there. And I think what's happening is there were a number of young people that were enthralled by President Obama. He was more popular with college students than anybody probably since Ronald Reagan carried a large percentage of the college vote. And so these young people were, he was a leader, he's dynamic, and now they're beginning to question, is government successful? Is government the answer? Is it the solution? I think a lot of these young people said, oh, the president's going to get us health care. Well, they were thinking free health care, and now these voters from 2008 are now 25, 26, 27. They're getting off their parents' health care system, and they're now realizing that what they're going to have to pay under the system for what they're going to receive and whether they really need it is dramatically different. So I think that there's a time and an opportunity to point out to young people that what made this country great were those risk-taking entrepreneurs. And let these young people understand that the free market is truly the only successful component in an economy.
You know, I actually think it's a great time to be young. I know all the negatives, we all read that, but it's a great time because of the possibilities, and the possibilities through the internet, Kickstarter to raise money. You know, there's no concept of shame if you fail at anything anymore. It was an experience. There's a lot of help that, you know, an ideas flow. I think it's really exciting. Yes, a very creative time. I believe it'll be a very creative time looking back, I hope, looking back. Anyway, what drew you to economics as a field of study?
I'm sorry?
What drew you?
What drew me to economics, what really drew me to economics, it was really, I'd have to say, the original moment that changed me or put me in the direction to study economics. I was walking to school. I went to a Catholic high school in Northwest Detroit, was walking to school with my brother, and making a long story short, for 3 days we kept walking, and we'd get to behind this new individual in our neighborhood, and my brother would split to the right, I'd split to the left, and this man was blind, and he had a seeing eye dog, and on the fourth day, he asked us if we would meet him a little bit earlier and walk to the bus stop with him, and we did. Turns out his name is Tom Harico, and he was a stockbroker for Merrill Lynch. And I was in junior high, and my brother was in high school. My brother was getting ready to graduate, so for the first year, my brother and I both played sports, were good students, and my brother would come home from whatever athletic team he was on that time of the year, and he would stop at Mr. Harico's house and read the Wall Street Journal to him. And because Mr. Harico and he and his wife had 2 children, and my brother today is a VP of investments with Oppenheimer down in Detroit, and when my brother went off to the University of Detroit, I was the one that read for Mr. Harico. And so he was just, he was the first one to tell me about Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, and and he was this individual who, you know, Junia could have been, you know, could have depended on government for everything in his life, but he never did. He made it. He figured out his bus route. He made it to school or made it to work every day in downtown Detroit. He was a great a mentor. And then my father is my hero, and he was just a big believer in freedom and free enterprise. And for me, I looked at Hillsdale and Hope College and Northwood, and decided on Northwood University because my dad just hit it off with Dr. Watts when I was looking at going to school.
Was this blind man, was he as they call it now, a mentor, a teacher? Did he answer questions? It sounds like he introduced you to at least Hayek's work.
Oh, he was wonderful because I would read articles in the Wall Street Journal to him on usually the editorial page. And so I became a much better reader and a public speaker because I was reading to him. And then he would ask me to give him the quotes on the stocks each day. And then he would tell me where he thought the economy was going and, you know, what the general movement was. And I remember we had one comment, he was against Nixon's wage and price controls.
Yeah.
I was reading for him at that time, and I really didn't know what I was, talking about at the time, or what he was talking about, but it stuck with me, and then it made perfect sense later on. And he eventually retired, moved up to Traverse City, and had a cherry farm, and he died a few years ago, but was just a wonderful, wonderful human being.
Isn't that funny, the role of serendipity?
Yeah, exactly.
In life.
Yeah.
So what are you teaching your students today? Because I get they're pretty demoralized about the economic prospects for them out of school.
You know, what's really interesting is that, I don't know whether you know it or not, but we conducted the second year in a row. I led a team of economists from Northwood, Central Michigan, and Rutgers. And we, for the second year in a row, did the competitiveness study for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce.
I didn't know that,
And so in 2012, we analyzed Michigan versus right-to-work states, non-right-to-work states, and a national average. And that study came out in the fall of 2012. It made it to the governor's office. Every member of the state house and state senate got it through the State Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And the interesting part of it was that it was just hard, cold data. We didn't take any position other than what the data showed. And the data basically said that right-to-work states were a lot more productive than non-right-to-work states. Non-right-to-work states had higher per capita incomes, but if you looked at the 15 years of our data, the right-to-work states were increasing dramatically, and by 2015, the average of non-right-to-work states would be lower than the average of right-to-work states. So we looked at over 200 variables, and then we repeated the study this year, and we added a fifth category, which was the Great Lakes states. And so when you look at Michigan, Junia, the last couple of years, the good news is at the federal government, a lot of us are disappointed and feel that we need to see things change. But if you look at Michigan the last couple of years under Governor Snyder, we're not there yet. But we certainly, our data does validate his statement that Michigan is the comeback state. We led the Great Lakes region in GDP growth for the last 2 years. We led the Great Lakes region in income growth the last 2 years. We were the #1 producer of manufacturing jobs not only in the Great Lakes region, but we were top 2 in the country percentage-wise. We were #1 in terms of manufacturing jobs created. And the other thing that's really interesting about it is that if you looked at Michigan, people say, well, the TARP dollars, the federal bailout dollars, reinvigorated the auto industry, and there certainly is some truth to that. I would have done it differently. You probably would have done it differently. But if you segment it and then you look at the fact that we have 19 Fortune 500 companies in Michigan, 9 of those are non-automotive related. Mm-hmm. Companies like Dow Chemical, companies like Masco, companies like Whirlpool, Kellogg. Mm-hmm. If you look at the trough of the Great Recession, which was March of 2009, and then you look at it at the end of last year, you can say that the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 are 240 and 260% respectively of where they were in March of 2009. Dow Chemicals at that time was up 700%, probably 750 after yesterday's move. Whirlpool's up 730%, Masco's up 530. So the non-auto stocks are up almost 400% or 160% of what the market has done in general in Michigan. So Michigan is a lot more exciting, and that's what a lot of our students were involved in doing that research.
What were the values of your parents when they were raising you in Detroit?
My mom and dad, my mom passed away a couple of years ago. My dad will be 90 this year. And my parents were 2 of the kindest, most generous people that I've ever met. As I said, my dad's my hero. My mom certainly was my hero. And when I look at it, my mom's family came over on the boat from Ostrowiecka, Poland. My dad's family was 1 generation removed. So my grandfather, on my mom's side, was first generation, as was his bride, my grandmother, who I never knew. And on my dad's side, my great-great-grandfather came over from Ireland. And so we're strong Irish Catholics who had an incredible belief in a very eclectic world. We had the neighborhood that I grew up in Detroit. We had close friends that were Jewish. We had friends that were in Dearborn, not too far away, that were Muslim. We had Baptists, Protestants in our neighborhood, and it was just this wonderful, idyllic part of Northwest Detroit. And so, my mother, we come from a family of 9 kids. My mom,
I shouldn't laugh. I just, as a woman, I think that's a lot of work.
Absolutely. My mom worked for the Federal Reserve Bank for
good for her,
for 8 years until my mom and dad got married, and then she was, as she pointed out, a household engineer. My dad is an engineer by training with an MBA. Worked for Michigan Consolidated Gas, and they taught us never make excuses. They taught us to work hard. They taught us to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They always told us that the glass was half full, not half empty, and they always made us accountable. The thing that my father said to me one time after when I was in high school, the drinking age was 18, and I made the varsity football team, and I had gone out and had a few drinks with a couple of the varsity seniors. Should not have. He made a point how wrong it was. And then he said something to me that's always stood with me. He said, number 1, when you look in the mirror, are you proud of yourself? And then he said, number 2, the only thing I can give you is a good name. And he said, the worst thing that you can do is ruin it, and you can ruin it at a moment's notice. And so he said, take great pride in who you are, and understand that you can disappoint a lot of other people. But your life will not have meaning if you can't look in the mirror and be proud of who you are.
He was wonderful.
Yeah, good man.
And did it go into you at that moment?
Oh, that was one of those Kodak moments for me, one of those aha moments, and I've always tried to, look at individuals for what their potential happens to be. I've been fortunate to marry 5 levels above my pay grade with Pam, and we have 4 wonderful children, and I just try to take my parents' upbringing and try to be half the parent to my kids that they were to me.
Do you do curfews, and how do you handle limits?
Well, Junia, I'm proud to tell you that all 4 of our children are married and
Oh my gosh,
and gone. But the answer is absolutely yes. And I'm a huge believer in curfews. One of the things that we always did with our children was we provided them with cell phones, and it wasn't always easy. Financially, having 6 cell phones at one point was a challenge. But I always said to them, if I call you with a cell phone and you don't answer, you no longer have a cell phone. And that was always it. And I always wanted to know where they were, and I always wanted to make certain that they understood boundaries, because I think that's really important with young people. I think that, as you noted, there's so many great opportunities in this world today. But I think what young people need today are boundaries. Young people need to understand, this is the parameter that I'm going to live in. This is my comfort zone. This is how I'm going to discover who I am and what I want to be. And at a certain point in time, those boundaries are going to go away, because they're going to become independent. They're going to find that special person in their life. They're going to get married. But I think that that's the most important point about things with curfews, with wanting to meet 3 daughters, 1 son. Always wanted to meet who they were going out with. If it looked like it was serious, wanted to meet the parents. And, thank goodness so far it looks like we're 4 for 4, and that's mostly due to their mom.
Tell me what else you did. I love the cell phone idea. What are other things that you, I wouldn't say imposed on them, but required?
We always things like if they wanted an automobile, we set the price, what they could afford, and we always paid at least half the price, but we wanted them to have some dollar amount vested in the automobile. So whether we could or wanted to or should have bought it for them, we always said, you need to earn part of the keep as it relates to the automobile and as it relates to the insurance and the costs. We would help them, but we wanted to make certain that they understood that particular component. We always said that if they were going to play sports, that no matter how well they were doing, they could never quit. They had to finish the season because they were part of a team, and we spent a lot of time on teamwork. We noted that you're an individual, and in the end, as an individual, that's what your life is going to be based on, but you will be part of teams throughout your life, and it's important that when you're part of a team that you represent yourself, your family, and your team well. So we had kids that were good athletes, and they ended up playing different sports at middle and high, and we wanted to make certain that they were individuals that could make certain that they were involved in the kinds of things that would prepare them for the world as a whole. So we also wanted them to be involved in community service or community activities or volunteerism, and so we would always encourage them to make certain that they were given to the church or that they were involved in some civic stewardship type of project, because if you want less government, if you want a person who's more independent, if you want somebody to be a leader, you have to teach them to do those kinds of things.
I just love this. How did you prepare them for the world?
Well, again, I would say that in our household, because my wife is such a she's such a good and kind person, we realized early on that one of the things that we were going to do is we were going to have, first of all, a good cop, bad cop relationship. And I was always the bad cop, because it's not in Pam to be the bad cop. Point 1. Point 2, we always, we did it as best we could, Junia, to take our kids to see the world. And so we wanted, we had as wide a range of friends as was humanly possible. We were able to take the kids to many places in the U.S. We saved, and oftentimes we drove, sometimes we flew. We were able to take the kids to Europe at different times, a couple of times, depending on whether Pam was traveling or I was traveling, and whether we could take 1 or more of the kids with us for work. We did that every now and then. We went as a family. at one point, and so we wanted them to see as much of the world in as short a period of time, because we knew once they started college, they were building their own life.
True. So, we have learned a great deal that I personally approve of and like, and that is it needs to be lucky to be born in a family that has good values. And his father, and I guess your mother also, started this thing of hard work, responsibility. I love this. You, as a father, I give you a good name. You could lose it in a minute, you know, and you need to be looking in that mirror, and you need to feel that you're proud of you. I didn't say you need to feel, but you should ask yourself, do you feel proud of yourself? Loved what he did with his children. Wonderful. Cell phone, even though it was a little hard on the budget, you don't answer the phone, you lose it. Nice. You're laughing, but it's true. You know, the idea that you commit to community service because you're the part of the community and you have to do this from a child point of view. Love that they had travel and wide range of friends and the sense of good cop, bad cop. And I think that we ought to make them write a book on parenting, a little pamphlet we could hand out, because some people are so a little bit at a loss. Anyway, we're glad he's here. He's at Northwood University, you know, and remember, be a good person, go out and do something nice for someone you know and someone you don't know, and do it every day, because our country needs you. We need each other. We really do. You could lift someone's spirits up. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
To contact Junia, send her an email at info@juniadone.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadone.com. Thanks for joining us. See you next time for Uncommon Sense with Junia Doan.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.